I didn't become a renter until I was in my 30s. Late, I know. Before that, I'd always been on the other side of the deal. I'm a builder, and I'm also a landlord. I can already hear the groans. So let me say this up front. Everything I own, I built with my own hands. In college, I painted, did trim work, framing, cabinetry, whatever paid. After graduation, I saved enough to take on a terrifying amount of debt at an ugly interest rate, clawed my way out of it, and bought a condemned, abandoned warehouse as my first home. That warehouse became a 4-unit building. I lived there for the next decade while I started building new rental properties from scratch. Right before COVID, I sold that first building. The buyer wanted me out so he could raise rents to market. It was my first time being evicted, but I won't pretend I was a victim. Selling during a market spike softened the landing, and honestly, I was ready. Living in a place you built and owned for years starts to feel weird, like you're sleeping inside your own resume. So I decided to treat myself. I wanted a condo downtown. Compared to the 1-bedroom I'd chosen purely for ROI, this was a huge step up. I spent about 3 months touring places, watching listings, learning the rental market from the tenant side. Pride wouldn't let me settle. If I was going to rent, I was going to get the best deal I could. And that's how I learned the market that had favored me as a landlord was absolute hell as a renter. Then I got lucky. I found a Craigslist listing with 0 photos, which is usually a red flag. But when I went to see it, the no photos wasn't hiding anything. The owner just didn't know how to use a camera. He didn't even have a smartphone. The condo itself was nearly perfect. Mid-2000s building, floor-to-ceiling windows. High floor with a view, AC, open layout, and a reasonable price. There was one problem. The kitchen and bathrooms were aggressively worn out, frozen in early 2000s design crimes. The floors were the deepest, loudest cherry red you can imagine. Cheap, honey-colored faux wood cabinets, glossy black appliances, brushed aluminum everywhere, and that frosted glass lighting that makes every room look like an airport lounge. Still, the place was a steal, and the landlord gave me a very specific vibe. Older guy, hands off, not interested in micromanaging. When I made my offer, I included something I thought would be mutually beneficial. I'd handle maintenance myself and just transfer rent monthly. No calls, no drama, no, hey, my sink is making a noise. He loved that idea. He told me he'd bought a house in the suburbs and planned to hold the condo as a rental for at least 10 more years, until retirement. Where I live, tenant protections are strong. As long as he didn't sell, he couldn't just boot me without cause. We signed the lease. I paid the deposit and moved in. The last time I saw him in person was move-in inspection day. He gave me that firm, confident, boomer handshake like we were closing a business deal and said, "If you take care of the place, you can live here as long as you want." Then he disappeared. My wife and I loved the condo. It was the complete opposite of the up-and-coming neighborhood we'd left behind. We were 120 meters above the street with a view that still didn't feel real. Some mornings. But that kitchen and those floors haunted me. I had a plan. It was only a matter of time. One of my carpentry subcontractors did retail build-outs, showrooms, demo suites, model apartments for developers. If you've never worked around that world. Here's the funny part. When a developer is selling a 30-story tower, they'll spend hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions, building display units. Once the project sells out, all that high-end stuff gets ripped out and tossed, or quietly sold off. I'd used that second life market for years. When I built small multi-unit properties, I'd buy gently used cabinets, appliances, flooring, cash deals out of someone's garage. In the summer of 2020, COVID was in full swing. My sites were shut down indefinitely. The government was covering a big chunk of payroll, and I had a lot of time to stare at that ugly kitchen. My subcontractor texted me, One of his clients had cancelled a project, payments were frozen, and he was pulling out a demo unit. The layout was almost a perfect match for my condo. The specs were obscene. A full run of glossy white premium cabinetry, champagne bronze hardware, high-end appliances, white marble counters and backsplash, and about 100 square meters of light oak herringbone parquet, if I was willing to pull it up myself. Retail value? Easily over $100,000, not including install. His price? $10,000 cash. I measured everything, twice. Then again. 3 hours later, I asked him if he'd help me for $40 per hour cash for a few weekends. He said yes. All that was left was one email. I asked my landlord if he'd be okay with a full renovation of the condo, with one crucial promise in writing. I would return everything to the exact condition it was in when I moved out. He replied like it was nothing. No problem. Do what you want. We like having you as a tenant. And that was the green light. I tore out the old kitchen in 2 days, quietly. No permits. Pandemic rules meant inspections weren't really happening. But still, I kept everything controlled and clean. The slower pace had a side benefit. I dismantled everything carefully without damage. I labeled every part and wrapped it like I was packing museum pieces. Pulling out that old kitchen made me happier than it should have. I removed the cherry floors in a single morning, labeled and stacked them in order. My subcontractor installed the new kitchen in 2 days, while I started on the parquet. The parquet took me a week. I had to haul boards to my warehouse across town just to cut them. Running a miter saw in a condo during lockdown when everyone was trapped at home would have started a war. But in under 2 weeks, my wife and I were living in what was basically a brand new luxury condo for about $12,000 out of pocket. I know how that sounds. Why are you bragging about renovating someone else's property with your own money? Because in that moment, it wasn't crazy. I believed I'd live there for 10 years. Also, when I moved in, my rent was about $500 under market. With the upgrades, the unit would have rented for around $1,000 more than what I was paying. And in my area, there are times when renting makes more sense than buying. My monthly rent wouldn't have even covered the interest on a mortgage, never mind insurance, taxes, and opportunity cost of tying up cash. Cash is a tool in my world. The more you keep liquid, the more you can build. And if everything went sideways, I could sell the appliances and recoup a lot. I did the math. I weighed the risk. I just missed one detail: the landlord's wife. By spring of 2023, I figured the upgrade had paid for itself through 3 years of under-market rent, about 36 months of benefit. I hadn't seen the landlord once since 2020, and he never contacted me unless it was a quick confirmation that he'd received rent. So I got uneasy when, by the end of the first week of May, he still hadn't deposited the rent transfer like he always did. I sent 2 emails. No response. Then there was a knock at my door. I opened it and got hit with a wave of floral perfume so strong it felt physical. In the doorway stood a woman in red heels, patterned fabric draped over her like she was walking into a magazine shoot. It was his wife. Turns out my landlord had caught COVID in 2023. Yes, still. And he sent her to collect the rent. I grabbed my phone to cancel the transfer and went to get my checkbook. When I came back, she was still standing in my living room, spinning slowly like she was in a showroom. Oh my God, it's gorgeous. I heard you renovated, but I didn't think like this. Then she started touching everything. She opened my fridge, admired it, opened cabinet doors, ran the faucet, shut it off, ran it again, like 6 times. I watched her and thought very clearly, she's seeing dollar signs. After she left, it took days to get the perfume smell out. When my wife got home, I told her exactly what happened. She didn't even need the story. The scent alone was enough. 3 weeks later, a realtor called asking if they could bring a photographer to shoot the unit. The owners were selling. My landlord, now recovered, stopped answering calls and emails entirely. I was furious. Not because he was selling. People sell. I was furious because he wouldn't even have the basic decency to talk to me like a human being. My wife was furious because she didn't want to move. And I was angry at myself for believing his handshake and his "as long as you want" promise. The condo sold in 3 weeks. Even on a slow market, the upgrades made it irresistible. The new owners planned to move in themselves. They issued the legal notice, 3 months, and paid the required compensation, 1 month's rent. Then I saw the listing description: luxuriously renovated with premium appliances, cabinetry, and built-ins. No expense spared. My wife read that line and went quiet. In that way, that means she's decided something very final. My first impulse was to message the realtor and politely suggest they confirm what's actually included with the unit. But my wife was too angry, and honestly, so was I. We decided they could do their own due diligence. Here's the part where you probably know exactly what I did. It took me 3 days to remove the luxury kitchen and reinstall the original one. Same for the floors. Turns out you can lay roughly 90 square meters of flooring in a couple of hours when everything is labeled, cut, and pre-fit. I even went out of my way to make sure the old stuff functioned. Mostly. The old floor had a few loose areas, so I glued it down hard so it wouldn't squeak or bubble. That cheap flooring is basically disposable. If anyone ever tries to pull it up again, it'll crumble and split. The old faucet, a bargain brand, started leaking after reinstall. So I made the new owners a gift. I replaced it with the exact same model at today's price. That one also dripped slightly, only when running. Not enough to be obvious at a glance, but enough to be exactly what it was. A cheap fixture, doing cheap fixture things. I reviewed my original move-in inspection video to make sure everything matched the way it looked when I arrived. Even the tiny drywall holes were back in the same places. I also remembered something else. The original oven had a burned control board and would shut off every 10 minutes. My wife joked about leaving a hidden camera to catch the new owners' faces when they walked in. We didn't. Not because the temptation wasn't there, but because getting sued would have been very real, and intent alone can become a problem. We moved out about a week before their planned move-in. After that, I ignored the calls. Dozens of them. From my old landlord, from the new owners. I didn't pick up. Instead, I sent a registered letter with copies of the lease, the 2020 emails where the landlord gave written permission for renovations on the condition I restore everything to its original state, and the move-in inspection video on a DVD. Not long after, I got a message from the realtor. Something along the lines of, "You're petty. You're vindictive. You're lucky you didn't get sued." Which to me sounded like someone had consulted a lawyer about suing me and got told, "You can try, but you'll lose." The building concierge later mentioned that nobody had moved into the unit yet, which opened up an even sweeter possibility. Where I live, if you evict a tenant claiming the buyer is moving in, but they don't actually move in within 6 months, the tenant can be owed serious compensation. Up to a year of rent for a bad faith eviction. I still haven't bought a new place. We ended up renting 1 floor up in the same building. Different layout. Thankfully better finishes, even though it cost more. I set up alerts for sales in the building. If another worn-out unit hits the market, I'm ready to make an offer fast. After all, I already have a kitchen that would fit perfectly.
That's where the story ends. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think of this story in the comments. Subscribe to the channel and see you next time.